working for you. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for you is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for you.
Good afternoon and welcome to Working for You. We're very sorry for the delayed start. However, we are here and we hope to have a very lively discussion on today's program. Thank you very much for tuning in wherever you are in the world. Your company, as always, is very much appreciated. I am Roy Williams, your host. Today we are going to be talking about a very important topic. That is the elimination of violence against women. Last week, we were talking about International Men's Day. This week, we are focusing on issues related to women and girls. I have some panelists with me, and I introduce you to them right now. I have Mrs. Celia Christopher, of course, who all of you know, and who is no stranger to this program. She is the director of the Department of Gender Affairs. Mrs. Christopher, welcome. I have Mrs. Chanel Charles, who also works in the Department of Gender Affairs as a senior gender officer. Chanel, welcome.
Thank you.
I have from the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force, from the Special Victims Unit, Officer Patrice Dorr. Officer Dorr, welcome.
Thank you.
And I have, he was here last week and he's back here again, Mr. Melvin Agard, who is the President of the National Men's Council. Mr. Agard.
Yeah, blessed.
Welcome. November 25th is designated by the United Nations General Assembly as International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. The date marks the beginning of 16 days of remembrance and activism, culminating in International Human Rights Day. Violence against women and girls continues to plague societies worldwide. It is a very grave issue that must concern all of us. Here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have our own share. Some may say it is widespread, persistent, and devastating. It is a human rights violation that remains largely unreported due to the impunity, the silence, the stigma, and the shame surrounding it. Sexual violence against women and girls is rooted in centuries of male domination. Let us not forget that gender inequalities that fuel rape culture are essentially a question of power imbalances. And that was said by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Let us start with this quote. Do you agree or disagree with this view? Chanel. Sexual violence, I repeat it, against women and girls is rooted in centuries of male domination. Let us not forget that the gender inequalities that fuel rape culture are essentially a question power imbalances.
I agree. Not only do I agree, but we have to remember, like in different cultures, it's the norm for them. Well, it's not the norm for us here. And sometimes I think it's because what we were taught growing up. Girls are different to boys, and sometimes, well, right now, okay, when you go back to inequality and how perception of society, it depends now on how maybe a girl is dressed in town. If she have on a short skirt, a man would say, oh, she just like that and she asks for it. And sometimes it's not so.
Right. Is it that girls are different to boys because there are certain differences between the sexes? Or is it that it's in a thinking in society that girls are inferior to boys?
Well, certain parts of society may think that way. I don't think you can paint it with a broad brush when you say society.
In some societies.
Right. In some society, yes. And it is, as you said, this whole issue of power relations. Male were raised to think that they're rough and tough, and so they want to, they lord it over, as we say, the fairer sex. So it's always this issue of power relations when it comes to rape and domestic violence and those type of issues.
Right. So we are talking here about power. It's about power imbalances. And right. Now, what is being done? We have this problem in our society. We cannot pretend that it does not exist. It exists, and it is sad that it exists. As I began by saying, a lot of it goes unreported because of the shame and the impunity and the silence and all of that. A lot of it goes unreported. However, this 16-day campaign of activism against gender-based violence is a call for more women to become active, to become activists against violence towards them. Is the state doing enough to protect women against gender-based violence? Yes.
I am not sure if we'll be ever able to do enough because society demanding more and more. And with gender-based violence, with all this awareness raising that we are doing, we are asking people to break the silence. And so if you break the silence, you must have things in place in order to address that. And so the state has been doing a number of things. They have enacted legislation. They have established a legal aid clinic. We provide services to victims, and I have to keep using the word victims well throughout this whole discussion because the focus is not just only on women and girls. We do have men who are being abused, and you have gender-based violence against them. We have partners with NGOs. We have the National Men's Association here. And we have been doing, the state has been doing quite a number of things. We've signed on to our international instrument and so on. And if you are a member of the international community, there's some stuff that you really have to ensure is done in your country. Because they address these things at the international, regional, and national levels.
Right. Now, when we speak about violence against women and girls, what are we really talking about? Because violence is a general term. What are we really talking about specifically?
Well, the type of violence that mostly affects women and girls specifically is domestic violence and rape.
Domestic violence and rape. Domestic violence is violence that takes place within the home towards women and girls within the home. And rape is really sex by force. And also, we can talk about femicide.
That is not a big issue for us here, but we do have cases of femicide because it's intimate partner violence, where a girlfriend or boyfriend is murdered by their partner.
We have a lot of rising cases, especially in Latin America
Oh,
and
yeah.
in other parts of the Caribbean. You
Yes.
find that happening. For example, in Trinidad, that used to happen quite often, where you have these murder-suicides. So the man would kill his intimate partner and then kill himself. So murder-suicide. And these are basically cases of intimate relation and crimes of passion. Jealousy and anger and all of that sort of a thing that can arise within a relationship, and people not really governing their emotions well. So you find gender-based violence takes place between people or with people of ungoverned emotions,
Well,
who are not able so much to govern their emotions.
gender-based violence, specifically domestic violence, it knows no boundary. It affects class, race, you name it. It spreads across the whole gamut. So gender-based violence affects everyone, communities, society, individual families.
Right. Now, what is the Department of Gender Affairs doing to raise awareness of this problem? Because we need to raise awareness.
Mr. Williams, is not just yes what we are doing, but besides the activities that we have for this 16-day, we normally have workshops for victims of domestic violence. The last one we had was batterers intervention. We're supposed to have a follow-up for the batterers intervention workshop, but we have our on-call domestic violence phone, so we are there throughout the year, because I know people may say, oh, it's just 16 days and they're doing things now for 16 days, but we are here throughout the year. Every radio show we go on, we always tell the public about call our on-call phone, because most of the times they would say they can't get the police, but you could call us and we could try to get them. But for this 16 day, started on the 24th of November was our church service at the Christian Life Assembly, and on the 25th we had from a man's point of view. We have Mr. Melvin Agard here with us because this year the department partner with the NGOs within different communities. So he's a part of one of the NGOs, so he's here with us today. He can speak to the NGOs and their involvement with gender affairs and the local theme that we came up with for this year. Yes, there's a theme, the UN theme, Orange the World, Generation Equality Stands Against Rape. And among the department and the NGOs, we decided that we should have a local theme, which was hashtag Love Echoes Loud. So I will leave that part for Mr. Agard. So we had on the 25th, we had From a Man's Point of View, and that was on Sister Sensei's show. The 26th, yesterday, we had a workshop with the teens, and that workshop was a gender-based violence workshop. On the 27th, which is today, we are here. So that was on our calendar. Friday, the 29th of November, we are going to join the youth department, and we are going to join the march. The children that we had yesterday, the teens workshop, they're going to join our department, and we're going to join the march tomorrow. Look for us. We will have blue shirts. They mark Youths for Human Rights. They would have the placards and ready for the public to see that they stand against rape, and they stand against gender-based violence, they stand against domestic violence, because yes, they are from parents who are involved in domestic violence. On the 3rd of December, I'm asking the public to please support the department. It's an open forum discussion with 5 pastors. The topic is domestic violence and its religious stance. This would be at the St. George's Anglican Church from 6 in the afternoon. So we're really asking the public to not stay at home, but come on out, ask your questions. They tend to have questions about domestic violence, and what the pastor would say, come and ask the pastor, come and hear, what this stance is. Right? So on the 4th, we would have youth beat, and this youth beat would be with 5 high school students. The topic would be consent, appropriate behaviors. So that too, I want the public to tune in and listen to the teens as they tell you about consent, what they know, what they understand from the word consent and appropriate behaviors. On the 6th of December, we are going to have Wear Purple Day. So you wear something purple that day in awareness as to, we can't end gender-based violence, but we can reduce gender-based violence. So stand with us. We have sent out letters to the banks asking them if they could wear purple or decorate the offices purple. So we're just asking the public to just wear purple that day on the 6th of December. And on the 7th of December, we would have another radio show that's Inside the News from 12 with Clive Bacchus. And it's the same topic, Love Echoes Loud. And we had a little discussion with the NGOs, our meetings, and we talk about love of attraction, why women continue to choose or stay in abusive relationship. So that should be a very interesting radio show on the 7th of December. So we are really asking the public to support us, stand with us to end gender-based violence.
I have my own experience of domestic violence. When I was growing up, I saw my mother being abused physically. I was a child, but I still remember the feelings of anger and hurt that I had seeing my mother being abused. And as a child, basically being powerless to do anything about it. And wondering, why is it that my mother stayed in this abusive relationship? I have had a lot of time to reflect and work through a lot of things. Now that I'm much older, I am wiser. I have studied, I've done psychology, I've looked at a lot of things to be able to understand. And I abhor domestic violence. I hate it. I hate it because of what I saw happening to my mother. Now, there are children in homes that experience this and who somehow have a sense of confusion and who somehow feel that fighting physically and so on is the way to go about resolving conflict. It's learned behavior, and they themselves grow up to be abusive towards their partners. What do you have to say about that, Sinead?
I'm glad that you said that, because yesterday when we had the workshop with the teens, we were talking about the effects of domestic violence. And one of the students said, when I said one of the effects would be breaking up of families, and she was like, yeah, because I hate my father for hitting my mother. So I was telling her, yes, I'm glad that you recognize that, but I was asking her what help did her father got, and she was like, I don't know, I don't care. And at the end of the session, I asked them to prepare their plaques for Friday for the march. So I said to them, write something on the plaque that surrounds domestic violence, gender-based violence, gang violence. And she said she wanted to put, Daddy, why did you hurt my mommy? So I'm seeing that she's hurting. She's 16 and she's still hurting at this point. So I asked her, what's the relationship with you and your dad? And because she have a baby also. And I'm asking her, do your son know his grandfather? And she like, I don't want him to know his grandfather, but I don't tell him anything bad. But I told her, okay, I'm glad that you said that, but I think that you need help at this point. You and your mommy, you need help. So we can see that, yes, it affects children. It breaks up homes. I could remember last year, for 16 days campaign, I took 3 prisoners to the high schools. And when we went to Virtual's high school, they were talking about, they were in gangs, these 3 fellas, and 2 of them had lifetime sentences. And when they started to talk to the children, I realized one girl started to cry. So I asked the other officer with me to take her outside and to talk to her, console her a bit and see what was the issue. And then she said, it's fine, she can come back in and tell us why she was crying. So she said that one night, she lived in an extended family. So she was home, and one night some fellas came and broke into their home and shot 2 of her uncles. She was under the bed. So she saw everything that happened. So when she saw these prisoners, she was like, okay, she remembered what happened to her uncle, and she started to cry once again, all over. So that means that the child never got over the issue. So when I said to them, breaking up families, yes, it is breaking up families in our communities. And I also spoke to the guidance counselor and told her, you know, see if you can help her. If it goes beyond you, you know, I could always give you a number that you can take the child. Because she's about 15 and she's still hurting, and I'm sure that whatever little trigger she see, it will always come back.
Right. Now, the mighty sparrow has a song. Black up she eye, bruise up she knee, then she love you eternally. Mr. Agard, what is your view on this?
I'm so glad I'm hearing all this, because just want to say that violence is unavoidable. It's inevitable. We see that from baby stages, that parents start conditioning their children to use violence to settle issues, to show authority, to show directions. Then this process of conditioning continue to happen in the preschool, then in the primary school, then in the high school. And while all that is going on, the general society that is made up of that mindset, which were conditioned already to deal with issues in a violent way, because we see at home, when a parent is dealing with a child and can't get the matter settled, they use violence. When in school, there's an issue with the child, they go to the principal office, they give them legs, is violence. A lot of this even go right back into maybe slavery, but we see that the conditioning of our young men and women start as babies, because when a mother just have a young baby and the baby doing something that she is not pleased with, she start tapping the baby. Sometimes it become more and more violent over the years. So from a very young age, we see that violence in our society is unavoidable. Now when these young men and women become adults and they get involved in relationships, starting their own families, they are already conditioned to understand that to deal with an issue, to settle a matter, to show who is the boss, authority, the only way to deal with that is through violence. And we see that men are predominantly physically stronger than a woman. So when the practice of violence go in effect, the woman will get abused, because they are already conditioned, and not only conditioned to settle matters using violence, but the general society too also expect men to use violence to protect their families and even to settle issues that sometimes might go outside of the household. So violence is unavoidable. Food for thought.
It is unavoidable, but at the very same time, although I take your point, violence is avoidable. And we want to start with that premise that it is avoidable, rather than starting with the premise that it is unavoidable. Because we don't have to resort to violence to solve conflict. And when I speak about violence here, I am talking about physical violence, taking up knives and taking up guns and fisticuffs and all of that sort of a thing. Even though it is something that we were taught, we have to relearn. And even though you said that we were conditioned that way, we have to be reconditioned. We have to be re-socialized to know that in order to deal with problems, in order to deal with conflict, we cannot resort to violence. There's a way to deal with it. Because violence engenders more violence. It engenders more hurt. It engenders more pain. And we see it all the time. There is no end to it. It goes round and round and round. It is cyclical. And so therefore, it is avoidable. Let us start there, because if we start saying to some people that it is unavoidable, they may think that this is the way for them to go. It is avoidable. Mrs. Christopher.
I think we take in domestic violence in this country very lightly, but it's a very serious problem. It has potential to affect the development of the country. If you look at the cost of a case of domestic violence that we have not really put together in St. Kitts, I look at something out of Canada and other places. We are not even touching the surface when we handle one case of domestic violence. And it's also a human rights issue. It brings into the picture the issue of discrimination and so on. So the issue of gender-based or domestic violence, it is very, very, very serious. And because it can potentially have serious effect on the development of the country, we ought to make sure that we have the things in place and that we address this issue quickly before it gets out of hand. Because a lot of some of the domestic violence in particular, I believe, is a driver of crime and violence. And it's a very big driver. All of these boys you see running around, well, not all, some of them, because they have different issues. They are angry. Somebody talk about the issue of beating the mother. Now, I'm a young boy. I'm in the home and I have to look at this. What do you expect? I go out, I may even attack the first person that I see because I'm so angry. And so this issue of violence really, really, really has to be taken seriously.
Yeah, but no young boy wants to see his mother being beaten. But at the very same time, you ask the question, then why does that young boy grow up to beat his girlfriend?
Because children live what they learn.
That's exactly what I was speaking about.
Yeah, children live
but
what
could
they
I
learn.
just mention something in
Yes.
the area of making it avoidable? I think that it is very difficult to go against your nature. And when people are conditioned a certain way, I think that now that we are where we are, we can't go back and undo. So the question comes now, what do we do about this situation? I would propose that we put certain committees in place to start some research, especially for school, and then we could put another committee together to start research for parenting, meaning that once this research is done and the findings are there, you know, looking for alternative ways to deal with discipline, alternative ways to deal with issues, alternative ways to demonstrate authority and to show authority and directions and all these different things. I think that we can put committees in place to do the necessary research locally and then even regionally, because we seem to have regionally a lot of the same issues based on, you know, us being out in the Caribbean for whatever reason.
Right, and some of the violence is really fueled by sexism. It is sexism where one sex feel as though it's more powerful and more dominant than the other, and also it is fueled by misogyny as well. There are some people who have a hatred for women.
You think we suffer in that area, Vegas?
I'm speaking generally. I'm
Okay.
speaking generally.
Good.
And then, of course, you have some people who have a hatred for the gender-based thing.
Yeah.
You know, if you have girls who are leaning towards being lesbian and so on, they are violent towards them as well. And these are things that we have to look at and to come of age in terms of our respect, how we respect people. Because at the end of the day, to be violent against someone else, it's a matter of disrespect. You're affecting somebody's human rights. Now, on the other hand, we have a lot of cases that are not being reported. And why? Why? They're not being reported because either that the woman feels threatened, that if she speaks, she is intimidated. She probably thinks that, oh, this is going to kill me. From the minute I try to escape, either that I will be killed, something would happen to me, and so on. Or sometimes it's because the woman is dependent upon the man for financial help. And so therefore he uses that to his advantage to keep her in line or to manage her or whatever the case is. So, you know, when I was at the college, I used to say to the girls in my class, look, make sure you take your education seriously so that you do not have to depend on a man to support you. Because that in itself, although it shouldn't, what happens is that men take advantage of women who are financially dependent upon them. It is a fact. Now, law enforcement. What is law enforcement doing about gender-based violence? Do they laugh it off? Or does it become another issue for melee? There's a protocol, I think, if people report a domestic violence, domestic abuse case. Officer Doe, what is the protocol when you receive a call or a report? How do you handle the incident? Because the handling of the incident, we know these are sensitive matters and have to be handled sensitively, but at the very same time, how they're handled can either make or break that person that is being abused or empower the abuser.
Yes, once a report is reported to the police will hear the report, and then we will let the person know what options they have. If they want the police to warn that person or take the matter before the court. Once the person wants the matter to be taken before the court, there is a procedure that you go through where during your investigations, you record statements from the complainant and any other witnesses. Sometimes you can go by way of summons or by way of arrest, according to the nature of the report. Once the police has done their part, the matter would be put before the court and the court will set a date. Sometimes during like domestic violence report, some persons will request a restraining order once they're living together.
What if they're not living together? Are you saying that a restraining order cannot be put in place?
No, the magistrate will not grant a restraining order. There is an order which is called a bound over to keep the peace, where the regular police would investigate the matter and it will be put before the court once they request the court action.
You said something there, a warning. So, a warning. I have an issue with that. Because if you have domestic violence taking place, something is terribly wrong. And a warning does not solve it. Because in my mind, when somebody have reached to this stage of being violent and physically violent towards another person, a warning is not enough. That person who is doing the abusing basically needs help. They've lost it, as far as I'm concerned. And the very fact that they have done it once, they will do it again. And you find that is what happens. Sometimes, you say that you forgive, and then the person does it again, and then they come, and after they've violently abused you, they come and they want to have sex and they want to lovey-dovey, and after that, after the abuse, and you think of the confusion within the person. And so it's a cycle that continues. The person says, I'm not going to do it again, and they do it again, and then you find yourself becoming more and more giving in to the person all the time. So my thing is, if anybody puts their hand on you, run.
Yes, but persons have an option as to if they want the police to warn or take the matter before the court. Sometimes, once the complainant requests that the police warn, all reports are relayed to gender affairs. Sometimes they will get counseling. Counseling will be recommended. Gender affairs will set up the counseling for them, and they work with them follow-ups and those sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just say something here.
Yes, Mrs. Christopher.
A lot of the issue with domestic violence, even though we are out there sharing information, and we come here every year and we say the same thing over and over and so on, and that protocol has made it clear what each person is responsible for. But I want to say, the lack of information, with all of what we're doing, there is still the lack of information on the part of people in the general public. You also have, and we are all of us who work in this field of domestic violence, we are guilty of feedback. Sometimes we stay too long to give feedback, sometimes we give no feedback at all. And now no one organization, all of us guilty about that. I will support Miss Duo on the fact that sometimes when a victim show up, the police to make a report, because I've seen this many times, where the police give them their option, and the situation is grave, but they decide, you cannot force them, you cannot make them do anything, and they decide, you do everything, take it to a point, and then they come back and say, I don't want to go to court, I'm not going to court. There is very little that the police or gender affairs or anybody can do. What you can do is offer them other help, find out what it is that they really need. And so from the Department of Gender Affairs, when someone walks into a typical day when somebody walks into the department to get help, we explain to them what we do. We give them the option, and we make the referral to whichever agency they want to go to. Sometimes even in the counseling, when you're talking to them, when you're telling them about counseling, they have specific counseling that they need. They will tell you, I need pastoral counseling, and do not want no clinical counseling. And so, you have to accommodate them with what they're saying. Then you also find sometimes you try to work with them. They may show up today, and you're ready to continue with them. They ain't show up until next week, and sometimes they don't show up at all until the next episode, until there's another episode. So, but you got to try and understand this issue of domestic violence, and it's when you work in it, you get a lot of experience of working with the victims, because it's a cycle. We are human beings. They fall in and they fall out. They get some licks today, they go back home, the boyfriend or the girlfriend may say, man, sorry I do that, man. Forget about it, I ain't going to do it again. And she tend to want to give you another chance, and so until the next time it flare up again. And the cycle continues.
I think that was basically my point, because when you're dealing with affairs of the heart, sometimes the reasoning goes and the heart sometimes takes over. You love somebody, but yet that person is hurting you. And you have to make a decision between you love them, yes, but do I want to continue to be hurt? And I think sometimes that is where the help needs to be placed to rescue the person from being hurt. And somehow to realize that, look, love does not hurt. If you love somebody, you don't want to hurt them. You know, and it takes, and that goes back to my point, and that's why I asked Mr. Agard, Mrs. Christopher, black up she eye, bruise up she knee, then she love you eternally. If you love somebody, you do not want to hurt them.
But is the issue again, it goes back to the issue of power and control. I'm going to show you who is boss here.
Which go back to the conditioning.
So it is really one of power.
Yes, it's definitely one of power.
And to show who is more powerful.
But
Isn't
then
that,
again,
officer? Isn't that so?
I would say yes.
I don't
In work,
make a
yes.
comment on what the officer was saying. And, I mean, the officer is doing what she is, supposed to do. But if you listen and you realize how you felt about how she, right? How she made those remarks about what they would do and what they can't do and different things like that. Now, you would want to think that the law is there to protect the life of persons who, in these situations. And I don't think it should be up to the person who is being abused. I mean, they're already being abused. So which means there already been some psychological damage already. So the judgment cannot be good enough to make some decisions like that. So I think that there need to be legislation in place, laws, whatever you want to call them, in place to protect the life and take it out of the hand of the person who is being abused to determine whether or not they think that the person should be locked up or whatever the case may be.
Because here it is, you have a woman. Her eyes are black. She goes to the clinic in her village, and the doctor asks her, "Why are your eyes black?" Her boyfriend black up her eyes, but yet she's going to say she bumped into the wall. You understand? She's afraid to disclose the abuse. She covers up because she has this fear of him. And it happens all the time. Just recently we saw a case going around on Facebook and so on about, a once prominent person who was physically abused. Well, at least that's what was reported on the Facebook. I don't know, but and so on. But if such is the case, that is awful.
You see, you raised a point earlier where people endure this abuse because of a sense of dependency. And I would normally say in the training and so on, when we go around training and stuff like that, this issue about my boyfriend is going to support me and take care of me. One of the questions I normally ask, if you're not an invalid, why don't you want to work? Because if you continue to let him take care of you, you develop this sense of dependency, and there is where he exerts his power. You can't do nothing, literally can't do nothing without the permission of your perpetrator.
Yeah, and then it's a slippery slope, because while we talk about women and girls, we have to talk about all genders. And we have to talk about violence against men. We have to talk about violence against lesbians, and we have to talk against violence against homosexuals and all kinds of things. Because once you're going to allow for one, it's a slippery slope for all. You see? And we have to realize that people have rights as human beings. Human rights must be upheld.
I'm glad you said that, because for the 16th day we invited the Equality Alliance, and we invited the JAMKID, that's the Jamaican Association, and the Spanish community. But we only had those from the Equality Alliance.
Right.
So we made sure to include all NGOs.
Yes, because that is extremely important.
Right.
Because gender, when we speak about gender, we're not speaking about just women and girls. We're speaking about men and boys, and
Right.
and we're speaking about, you know,
Women versus women.
women versus
We have
women,
those-
and so on. And we've seen in our society women being violent against women. And it goes around on social media. And what are they fighting for? They're fighting for a man. Two women ripping off each other's clothes in the street and carrying on, fighting for a man.
We're endangered species.
And then Macca Diamond sing a song. She said, she ain't in no cockfight with nobody. She's not in that.
What also happens too is sometimes they come to the department with cases. Victims may come to the department with cases. And you gotta be so careful how you handle those cases because they're looking for you to give them advice. But you gotta be careful because the very advice you give them could end their life. And so I always tell the officers, take your emotions out of these cases. It's not about you. The people come here to make a complaint. Your job is just to do what the law says you must do. You cannot give them no advice because you are not expert in some of the areas you're trying to give advice in. So what you need to do is to send them to the people who are the experts in these, make the referral to the people who are the experts in these areas.
Yes, because the physical abuse is one thing, but then the psychological, how people are affected psychologically and emotionally, they could be damaged for life.
Physically too.
And physically as well. And then the violence that takes place in the workplace. What about that? The unwanted sexual advances. You're not going to be promoted if you don't sleep with me. And all of that, the street harassment and the stalking and all of those kinds of things are violence too, you know.
Yes, they're violent. People come to the department asking about sexual harassment. But the trouble is, we don't have any legislation with regards to sexual harassment. There is model legislation for the OECS, and these model legislation was supposed to be adopted nationally in the countries in CARICOM. But we are still waiting because we can't handle it. And so when they come for harassment, in this sexual harassment in the workplace, I direct them back to the Department of Labor, because the Department of Labor is supposed to deal with those issues on the job.
Not your department,
right,
Department of Labor.
But then again, I have to say, everything comes to gender, you know. Everything comes to gender, but we know what we are supposed to deal with, and so we just send them to the department where they're supposed to go. People come to the department, and I really want, I hope people out there listening with this one, because there are women and men, they live in at home comfortably. Sometimes they may have some problems, sometimes they don't. But they want to branch off on their own. But you got to understand that when you're branching off on your own, it takes a certain amount of responsibility that goes with it. So if I am living with my mother and I decide to move out and live with my boyfriend, and especially if I have burned the bridges behind me, where I don't have a relationship with my family, or I don't have a relationship with my friend because of your boyfriend, when anything happens, you cannot go back to those sources, and people are not as kind as they used to be. People are afraid. So for example, if I move out to live with my boyfriend and we have this issue of domestic violence, you come to the Department of Gender Affairs. Do you have any close friends? What about your family? Me and my mother, them don't get on. Me and my sister don't get on. Me and my friend, the friend will say, I can't take you because relationships are becoming more and more violent, and the people you're dealing with, I can't deal with that. So they have nowhere to go, and they come to the department to get housing. We don't give housing. We do not give housing, and I hope people are listening. asking us to provide housing is impossible. We do not do housing. We try to find people who will take it, but as I said, it is becoming very, very difficult. People don't want to take people into the house because the boyfriend come around and stone the house or do some kind of foolishness or shoot up the house or do some kind of thing. So these people are out there. And even if they get a little respite, they get a little respite from it for now, and they find themselves going back into the same situation to repeat the same thing again, to come back again. That's a situation that we have to take care of in this country. I mean, but people must understand when they're making, they got to be careful about the decisions that they make because there be some level of responsibility in these things. Sometimes I get called 11, 12 o'clock at night. Oh, me and my boyfriend was fighting and I don't have nowhere to go. What can I do with them? All I will say is call the police, because once it's physical abuse, that is a case for the police. We don't do police work. We don't lock up people. Once it's physical abuse, they have violated the law, and a lot of people don't acquaint themselves with the law. Physical, verbal, psychological, all of these things. Once you violate the law, then it's a matter for the police. So when they come and with a case and they start speaking and I realize it's a violation of the law, we kindly refer them to the police because those are the ones who deal with the violation of the laws.
Officer Donor, what kind of follow-up is done in terms of when somebody reports a case and so on? Do you have a mechanism in place for following up to find out, for example, how the person is doing or that sort of a thing?
Sometimes you will go back and visit them, see how they're doing. You will let them know the progress of the case once it is put before the court. You will let them know. Once you get the information from the court, you will let them know. Well, the case will be coming up, or this is the situation, why the case is not up as yet, we haven't get a date from the court, and those sort of things. You will find out how they're doing, what's the relationship now, and those sort of things.
Right. Now, while we speak about women, we have spoken so far about adults. We also have the issue of children and for unlawful carnal knowledge.
I mean, that is so
FUCK.
sickening. That is so sickening.
And you have issues of girls running away from home, and sometimes when you investigate why they're running away from home, it's because they are being abused and they're running away. They're looking for a safe space. Or you may have cases of the stepfather, or what we call the father-in-law. You know, the girl now starts to mature and mature physically and so on, and then he starts putting his eye on her and then starts interfering with her. And then she goes to the mother and she complains, and the mother dismisses it as nonsense, and all of that sort of a thing taking place. All of this is really violence.
Yeah, because sometimes the very people who are charged with keeping you safe are the one that violates you. And you find that in taking these matters to court, sometimes you have to shake your head how the justice system works. Because sometimes you have all the evidence, and this is why I say we should always push for the state against the perpetrator, that nobody can intervene once you commit that crime. Nobody, especially against children, nobody should be able to intervene to either stop the case, take it out of court, or do anything with it. The case is supposed to go forward to finishing. I mean, you take the life of a child, the trauma that you have inflicted on the child, but then when the case comes to trial, you not even to trial, you re-victimize the child because the perpetrator is being helped, is being enabled, while the child goes to that suffering. And some parents are involved in this. I have seen in the past, over the years that I've worked in the Department of Gender Affairs, I've seen cases reach to almost time to go the day when the case is supposed to go to the court. One of the parents is going to say, "My child is not going away. Me not do that." And somebody whisper in their ear, or give them some money or something,
Sometimes
and they
they
throw out the case. And this should never be. So I hope the ministers, them and whoever out there listening, that you all got to make this case, this state against the perpetrator. Do not give anybody a chance to intervene to block a case, especially when it involves children, from going to court. Adults can make their own decision, but when it comes to children, we're supposed to protect the children.
And the elderly.
Yes, and the elderly, they are being abused too.
Yes, children and the elderly. We are going to go to the phone lines because this topic, I think that many people should, want to engage in it because of the nature of it. The overseas number is 1718-577-2916. That is 1718-577-2916. And the local number is 465-2555. We await your calls. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Lesroy.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, I'm company. It really working for me, but
Right,
thanks for me alimony.
right.
Now, I like the topic, and I heard one of the caller there, I think he's a social worker, said, and I agree with her. When it comes to abuse of a child, I don't think anyone has the right to intervene and say they ain't going to no court. That should be law. Nothing could stop that. And I would suggest that when a man and his girlfriend or a husband and a wife, they got the dispute and they're going for counseling, be careful who they go to for counseling. Because I have known about one case and I heard about another case. A lady and her husband had confusion and they went to a lawyer for counseling. And the lawyer did really counsel the wife because he counseled her to pull away further from her husband while coming closer to he. And then he, the lawyer, now end up being the husband man-in-law. Because she and the lawyer come friends and they live together and make children and they're still living together. So now if she had gone to a woman to counsel her, that would not have happened. And if the man had gone to the man, if the husband had gone to a man to counsel him, it would have been different. And the other one that I heard about was a pastor from a Caribbean island around in the West Indies. He had two members of his church had confusion about who going out with this and who going out with that. So they went to the pastor for counsel. And the pastor tell the husband one by one, leave the husband out in the waiting room and they tell the wife come in. And he did counsel her. Because when they done, he come out and he tell the husband he don't have enough time, so he will have to come back another day. But the husband said, I'm glad you did counsel her, pastor, because I heard her bawling. The pastor said, yes, she ain't going to do what she do to you again. Because I give her good counseling. And you know what he counsel her with behind it? So I would suggest woman counsel woman and man counsel man. Otherwise, let all our go in front of the council or go get all council together. That's my suggestion. Thank you.
Well, my thing to that is that the counselor is in violation of the counselee. And he's not professional at all, whomever he is, because he should never prey on somebody in their most vulnerable state. The person is already vulnerable, and that is another case of power imbalance. Working for you, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon to you, Mr. Williams, and good afternoon to your panel there with you this afternoon. I've been listening to your program very much so, and it's a great topic. It's a topic that we have been discussing throughout this federation for a very long time. And I must say, I must tip my hand to Madam Christopher and the unit there at the Royal St. Christopher Police Department, because they've stepped up in making sure and trying their best to make things much better when it comes to violence against genders and things like that. And so, my contribution this afternoon. One, I think we need a rehab center here in St. Kitts. When I say a rehab center for abused women and maybe some abused men in all type of abuse, sexual, physical, mental. Put them in this home for at least a couple weeks or month, as long as it can take to rehab them. At the same time, they're seeing psychologists, seeing people who are expert in this type of affair, and try to get them rehab as best as they can to come back into our society, to live among people that they can have no fear and to be a better person. And when they left our society to go into the rehab center, I think we need to think about it, whether it's a private company or whether it's government. I think we need to start looking at that area. And the other thing that I want to touch on, and I know that you have Officer Dorr there, in a situation of physical abuse to an underage child, when the parents make the complaint and the evidence is there in terms of doctor's paper and everything, and time for the interview where the police officer goes out to the home and meet with the child and the parents at the same time. You know, at that time, the parents don't have much to say if they did not see the abuse. Is the child who is the one that's going to have the conversation with the police officer. But the parents is there because of the fact of the interview that's going to be taking place. And when all the facts are in terms of evidence from the doctors, the scars on the body and everything, and the child decides, no, I don't want that person to get locked up. I just want you to go and warn her. And then the parents cannot say anything about that because the police officer is going to go on what the child say. I think that law needs to change. And I'm not blaming the police officers because they're only carrying out their work and looking at the law and dealing with the situation within the law. But I think our lawmakers need to take a visit to those type of laws that exist right now and make changes to them. Because when you're dealing with a child under the age of 16 in terms of physical abuse or any other kind of abuse, I think that the parents, once they know what's happening and the facts are there, the evidence are there, I think the parents should be able to help make that decision in terms of with the police officer or those in authority who are doing the investigation to carry that case to court. I really think so. Then leave it up to the child to just make the decision to say, yes, I want it to go to the court or not to go to the court. That's my contribution for today, sir.
Thank
Ladies, thank you.
Working for you, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, working for you. Yes, I'm calling to say, I'll put my little input. From the time when I was a little child, I heard my mom, when my mom used to be abused. I could hear her crying. And my grandmother would lock us up in the bedroom because she don't want us to hear it. And then, I grew up, come to a young woman, went to St. Martin. A couple of times I went to visit her. When I go, I meet another person to be beating her. When I physically beating her. And I used to always tell myself, I used to be angry because, I couldn't even, when I was younger, I couldn't even fight for her. I used to be angry about it. But then after, when I went to St. Martin and I heard, like, he was beating her, this person, someone who she used to be with, who was beating her, I pick up some stone and start throwing at the door so he can open the door. He didn't open the door. I finally get to break the door down, and I went in, and I want to tell you, I pelted him some rock. Anyway, that he went. I think he got trapped. That's finished. That went away. And then me, my own self now, I was married, and in that relationship, I was verbally very abusive. The last time why I ran away from that relationship, he told me, I was in the bathroom bathing my 2-year-old baby, my 2-year-old daughter. He said to me, he was fussing him, and the water that give him, he hurt him. And he said to me, he said, I got a feeling to give you one fall, break your effing back. And when the cops come, tell them that you slip down in the bathroom and break your back. I said to myself, well, this ain't going to happen. Mr. Working for you, I ran. When I tell you, I got out of that house. I went, I called the police. The police in Angola told me, well, don't even say nothing to him and don't let them know that I make the report because they ain't going to believe me because I'm from St. Kitts. Remember this. The police told me, don't say anything because they won't believe me because I'm from St. Kitts. Okay? After he told me that, then I met him again and he said, you know what happened? I said, it's best for you to, he told me it's best for you to get away from him. I said, well, you don't have to tell me this. I know. I'm going to get away. So that's when I ran and I came to New York and I never been back. He always would call me and tell me he's going to kill me. Nobody is going to be with me but him. And if he can't get me, he's going to kill me. I never put back foot in Angola until when he dead. So I'm saying to you, women are afraid, but women have to open up and fight up. Put up their fist and tell them plain, you're not going to put your hand on me. You're not going to hit me. You're not going to curse me with those dirty words or whatever. Women got to open up and let men know and stop being afraid. And the best part of it. Once you're working for yourself, you're taking care of yourself. They support you, but once you're working for yourself and you taking care of yourself, no man have no right to come and put their hand on you and tell you this and tell you that. That's my two piece. But as I say, women have to stand up and fight back. Don't be afraid. They would curse, and what it is, men don't like to hear you curse them back. That's the part about it. And another thing he used to always tell me, oh, I can't buy this for you, I can't buy that for you because my mother don't have. So you know what I did? I went and I buy everything that I need. I bought my refrigerator, I bought my dining room set, I bought my living room, I bought everything in my house when I was in Anguilla. And he didn't like to see that. So as I say, men afraid of powerful women too. Women who are going to do for themselves and don't care no matter what. They're going to go and furnish and do what they have to do for themselves and for their kids. So that's my two piece.
Thank you so much.
All right, but a nice topic. Nice topic.
Okay, you've brought out a lot of issues just in your story. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Lesroy.
Good afternoon.
And good afternoon to you panelists there, especially Miss Christopher. Now, Mr. Lesroy, now I hear it's as far as they black up the eye and bruise up the knee, right? And then they're going to love you eternally. But remember Sparrow say no, take the one who love you. Take the one who love you. And if a lot of us was doing that, West Sparrow said, take the one who love you, we will not be in the situation. Sometimes things could change, but we will not be in the situation, in the relationship where we're into. And the next thing again, I am against any man who molests any child, whether boy or girl or whatsoever. Because a child cannot think for herself because she's young. She, you know what I mean? When I mean think for herself. But sometimes we force it on to those children, especially on the age. And the next thing again, to be truthful, these men, right, and some of these women who in a relationship, they know sometimes the problem before they get into the relationship, She know the man a violent man. She know how the other man don't treat other woman. And she get into relationship because of maybe him money or whatever he got. And situation and work out the way how she wants to work out. And whatever the man do, what he got to do, maybe he beat up and these things happen. And people like me who see all these things, I see a lot of men violently cheated, bad by woman, and abused by woman, whether sexually, verbally, and physically. A lot of men abuse, but a lot of men don't take the problem to the gender affairs. Like how the man will go and report the man or go to the police station. They don't do that. But these things happen, especially in St. Kitts here. And well, I don't listen to news, and I listen to news and I think. But I know that in St. Kitts it don't happen as much as a big country. Because we got the law here to protect us. Look at down in Nigeria and all those other countries. When I listen to the news, I put on the news. You see they kidnap these people, even big people, and kidnap them and put them in a place. And you look like nobody, a police or security forces, could know nothing about it because the country big and these people in a kind of way that nobody know. But people will see every day. 68 square miles that me replacing one another every day. Me neighbor up that abuse neighbor and you think me could report that. And then, police come. And when you see them people end back in the same relationship.
Yeah.
You understand?
Okay.
I believe that somebody like me. That's why I buy myself, because I learn from seeing woman treating man bad, and I learn from man treating woman bad. And to be truthful, I don't want to end up in this situation with no whether verbally or physically or criminally harm no woman. That's why I buy myself, because I learn from that.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful program. God bless.
Right. Working for you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm here listening to the program, and I want to hear my views as well. As a young child growing up, my mother was always in an abusive relationship, right? And at the age of 7 years old, my mother had a little daughter as well, and that child's father was, I don't know what to say, but it's like me growing up as a young child, seeing my mother getting physically abused, and it hurt me growing up as well, and to see it happening still. How could that be for me as a young child, a young lady as well, growing up to face the outer world and me to go into a relationship? How could that be?
She's basically saying that this whole abuse thing has affected her, and even affected her in terms of going into a relationship because of what she would have witnessed with her mother and an abusive relationship. And somebody said to me today, look, a woman, she said, when I told her the topic that we were going to be discussing on our program, she said, I'm not married, and that's the reason I'm not married, because I saw how my mother was physically abused.
Well, that's it. That is the exact thing I was talking about when I say how it impacts children and families. You live in this family, all you're seeing is abuse. You're going to do one of two things. You either want to get away from the situation, or you're going to become an abuser, or because children live what they learn. And this is a situation of, it was so impactful for you that you just can't trust. You can't bring yourself to trust. And so to avoid getting into those situations, as the lady said, she don't even know where to go with her situation, because she has seen and registered all of these things. But then with help, she can go to talk to a counselor, somebody who is trained, not any counselor, somebody who is trained in counseling, somebody who will keep your information in confidence. Talk to a counselor and get the help you need, because you have a life too. And I want to respond to the rehabilitation situation. It's the situation where getting a place for the battered women. We are working on that. We are working with a number of agencies. In particular, the churches have come forward and some private persons have come forward. The Garden of Rebirth, they're almost ready to do what they have to do. So there are going to be some spaces provided for people to rehabilitate for things. But it's going to take not just finding shelter. It's going to take a whole range of services to help them to get their life back together. But the Department of Gender Affairs is willing to work with people. But in terms of the counseling too, I want to say, I think this is being done in the court where the magistrate makes an order. But what you find is that one party is not going to go for counseling. And they should not get off lightly. Because if an order is made from the court, as far as I know, when an order is made, the only person who can change that order is the magistrate. But he would not know if reports are not made to say, well, the people are not coming. So this is something I want them to use that route a lot more often. So instead of them fighting and fighting, let them go get some counseling, man.
Right, and sometimes, all the time, what happens with people who are continuously abuse is that it destroys their self-esteem.
You become docile.
It destroys your self-esteem, and when your self-esteem is destroyed, your self-worth, your self-value, all of that sort of a thing, and to rebuild that really takes time. Because if your self-esteem is destroyed and your self-worth and your self-value, it even makes you more vulnerable and even more susceptible to more abuse. And that is the whole thing. And to stand up, like that woman was basically saying, that when a woman really stands up, that she becomes independent and starts to look for herself. Sometimes the man gets angry because what he wants is to keep her dependent upon him so that he will be able to control her. And that sort of a thing. And another thing too, you hear, sometimes about men and the control, wanting to tell a woman, what to wear. And some of them go to the point of this sort of a control, what makeup to put on, and all that sort of a thing. To me, this is a sort of a modern day slavery. You don't do that sort of a thing, because even though two people are in a relationship, you are both individuals, and you cannot control somebody to the point that they're like a robot or they're some sort of a puppet. That is also a form of mental slavery. That is basically what that is all about. Now, Mr. Agard, you are sitting there very quietly, and you are supposed to be, or you are, the president of a men's association. Are these things addressed in the association? Because last week we were talking about men. Today we are talking about women, but at the very same time we are talking about women in relation to men. And sometimes how men and because of their male identity and their toxic masculinity and all of that sort of a thing, they believe that the control and the dominance and all of these sometimes biblical things about man being the head of the household and all. Sometimes people take these things and they spin them in all kinds of way, negatively and so on. Are these issues that your men council focus on? Because it's going to take men and a shift in their mindset and how they think and so on to help with the reduction of violence towards women.
Well, earlier I said a few things. I kind of realized that you kind of avoided talking about them, but it's the core of the issue. We could stay here all day and a million people could call you with stories, and the stories are going to be similar. And so the question to ask is, are we just going to listen to stories, or are we going to try to find a solution to deal with the issues? And though I mentioned a few solutions, we don't seem to be, so into talking about solutions. We're just talking about the actual issues.
And we've spoken about quite a number of solutions.
No, we spoke about accommodating the issue. We're not speaking about solution. Solution means end it. You said earlier that you think it is avoidable, which means let's end it. Mm-hmm. But yet we speak about accommodating it, and we speak about it as is, but we're not speaking about how do we end it. I mentioned something about, bringing putting committees in place to do research, which to me is fundamental, because as the human being project through time, this is how we evolve, through knowledge. And in that knowledge, it takes scientific research in order for us to find solution for certain issues, whether they be in society, whether it is something in a lab to deal with chemistry, and all these different things. I'm saying, let's do some research. Because that caller who called in a while ago, that lady, you could hear the pain. You could hear the pain in what she's dealing with.
Right.
So she wants a solution.
Yes, and therefore the Department of Gender Affairs has mentioned quite a number of things. You have to bring awareness to the problem. You have to bring awareness and more people coming forward.
Right.
And that is part of the solution of people coming forward and seeking help.
Right.
People are not remaining in their
Yeah, but let me finish saying this, because I heard you also say that you witnessed abuse in your
yes.
coming up. Now, maybe believe it or not,
And I spoke
as-
in terms of how I dealt with
as
it.
long as you see these things, sometimes that thing travel with you through time, right to your grave. And I'm saying this not in terms of memory, but sometimes in terms of your behavior towards other people and so on. I'm not saying you particularly, but I'm saying some people is affected in that way. And
It depends on how it's dealt with, and I
Right.
think Miss Christopher mentioned that as well. People can experience the same thing, but they deal with it in different ways,
But you notice-
depending on how it's dealt with.
You notice that the callers would and they bring the contribution as to their experience, and then one element seemed to make a funny about one of it, and everybody laughed.
But you still haven't
good-
answered
good.
my question, Mr. Agar.
Right.
My question is, as a men's council, because we're dealing practically
Yes,
with
I'm going into
men,
that.
and women are more abused by men than anything else.
Okay.
Because you mention it, because they view themselves as being in power and in control. It's about male dominance.
As the Men Council, we actually have a project that we are trying to push toward in UNESCO to talk about a scientific research, a study. So that's the answer that was coming, but you didn't allow me to finish. So I was trying to tell you that the Men Council have cited all of these issues. We spoke to men who go through issues. We heard of men who have, and I'm not here to talk about those issues because the issues, like I said, could be in the millions. So we're talking about how do we fix this thing. So we have proposed to go with a research project that will span maybe from the 1960s to now. And when we get that data, we could take that data, carry it to the relevant ministries, and see how we could effect change in law or legislations in order to help protect these issues from continuing. And we are talking from the level of school right to up to college, to adults getting married and starting families. So if we are dealing with the issue, it's not about just talking it halfway. It's about the complete thing. You can't just flit ants all the time. Sometimes you have to go out and see where they're coming from and root up the whole ants nest and get rid of it. So the answer to your question is that we are interested in scientific research, social research, whatever the research may be, to get data so that we could effect change going forward in dealing with these issues.
Now, in terms of scientific research and in terms of data, I really don't know what scientific research and data, because the scientific researches have been done and the data is there. There is so much of it. Are you looking for something else?
Yes, we are. The data we are looking for, I'm so glad you asked, because that probably wasn't clear. The data that we are looking for is the data that concerns St. Kitts. So we are looking for all that information that span from the 1960s to now, where we have seen a lot of changes in society. The coming of the internet, the coming of cable TV, the coming of the jam band, where we don't just have steel band anymore, the school evolution. So we want that local data. That study.
So who are some of the people you're going to go to get this data?
Well,
I would imagine that the St. Christopher and Nevis police force, the Department of Gender,
Everybody.
Department of Social Services.
Everybody.
You simply cannot do it on
Yes.
your own, but
Definitely.
there's data.
There's a growing body of research. There's been research out there, and there's ongoing research out there. But Jacqueline Seeleyberg came here to St. Kitts just a couple of years ago, and she did a research on gender-based violence, and a lot of training went on too, especially for frontline workers in that thing. I think she did a paper on it, a report on it. It's there. It's there. So if there's any way that you could
Yeah, we would
go
love
and
to-
get your
we would
hands
love
on
to
the
get that.
research, you could get the research from the department.
While you speak about the research, and sometimes people live in research and all of this sort of a thing, but at the very same time you have to get practical. And, the research is one thing, but then what do you do with the research? You see, that's the other thing. I think I hear the Department of Gender Affairs talking about the raising of awareness, which is so important. We have to bring awareness to the issue. I think that we know what is underlying a lot of the violence that we see happening in our society. We know what is underlying a lot of it. It's about it's the conflict, the dominance, the battle for power, the battle for turf, the battle for all of this and so on. And we need to get I agree with you. We need to get to the bottom of it. We need to get to the root of it. But at the end of the day, the outcome must be the elimination or the reduction of it.
You're not going to totally eliminate domestic violence.
You are not going to.
But we
It
should
has
try
been
to.
with us. Yeah, people have tried, generations have tried, and it's still here with us. What we need to reduce it to as low as you can get it.
We need to.
Mr. Agard was speaking about I think it's the research. I think I answered him about the research. But the research that was done by UN Women, I think it was 2 sets of research that was done here. One was done from a lady from Jamaica. We have that also, so you can get.
They did
all
that
of the
research
people.
locally?
Yeah,
in
of
St.
course,
Kitts?
they
Okay.
came here and they did it. Yeah, you can get that.
But I just
Right.
wanted to say, Mr. Williams, you asked a question about what to do with the information. What I was saying earlier is to collect all that data, bring it to the table of the law enforcement, and see how we could get Parliament to effect change into legislations that would help to deal with some of these issues. I've read an article where it's saying now that 106 countries have started to put more legislation in place to domestic violence.
Right.
And I've heard one of the ministers, when we went to that church, mention some of the percentage of women who been, and these different things, and it is in the
Yes.
same article. So I would just say, I hope he's listening, that if you read the article, read the entire article, and see where St. Kitts could be a part of this whole thing, because
Right.
we need to don't just continue talk all the time, but to put the necessary laws in place.
Yes, we need an all hands on deck approach. Many stakeholders and so involved, because it's such an issue that is so important to us that it must be addressed from every angle, from every nook and cranny, from every organization, and a lot of it has to start in the home, how we are socialized in terms of dealing with conflict and our respect and tolerance for people who are different and all of that sort of a thing.
You raised the issue of awareness, and that has yielded a lot of results, because of the raising of awareness, people are coming forward to report. So you have more and more reporting.
And that is important.
And that is very important. But one of the challenges that we have is the issue of coordination, because we still can't get away from working in silos. I may be doing in gender affairs, but when the issue that we have in the Department of Gender, where our challenges arise, when we try to get the information, to coordinate it for reports, we have difficulty getting it from this agency, and that everybody is holding on to their information. We don't want names.
Right.
We just want numbers, because we want to see what the true situation is. Because if you hide your information, it is saying that the country don't need any assistance because everything is fine.
And on that note, of course, we are really out of time. We've had a very lively discussion and so on, on a topic that is so important, bringing awareness. And when I look at the news, I see so much activism. You see it in France, people taking to the streets in thousands. Of course, their population is bigger than ours. And in Russia and so on, where they have the problem of women being murdered and so on, in Russia and so on, by intimate partners and all of that sort of a thing. So it is about people rising up, people being activists and addressing this matter. Addressing this matter, whether it be rape, whether it be physical abuse, psychological abuse, marital rape, and femicide. And people think this marital rape is a joke, because, of course, it's about how people negotiate power in the bedroom. It's negotiating power in the bedroom, and the thing about it is that some people say, oh, but you can't rape your wife. Well, you can't rape your wife, because she said no is no. Her body is hers. The man might say, but she body belongs to me. And I can get it whenever I want. But when she says no, it is no. And that is the issue. No is no. I want to thank you so much for being on Working for You today, Mrs. Christopher, Mrs. Charles, Officer Dorr, and Mr. Agard. Thank you so much, and let us continue with our activism against the elimination of violence towards women. I wish the Department of Gender Affairs success in its 16-day campaign against the activism, elimination of violence against women, and hope that this will bring about some sort of a change in our society in terms of how we think and our actions towards women and girls. Thank you very much. You have been listening to another edition of Working for You. Next week we will be back for Working for You. I want to thank all of our listeners and all of our callers to today's program. I am Les Roy Williams. Until then, goodbye.
Working for You. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Les Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for You is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for You.